Although Easter was just about 2 weeks ago, Kentucky has been on a week-long Easter egg hunt trying to find their next guy as their head coach as John Calipari left to go to Arkansas. And guys, they found their guy supposedly. We're gonna talk more about that, but also the first 2 rounds of the Masters is already done. There have been cuts. Some of people have made the cuts, some of them did not, and there's some big names in there to talk about, and we are at the final week of the NHL regular season. We are in the home stretch, and the races are close. At top, MVP, President's Cup, it is as close as it can get, and we are really anxious to talk about that. But I'm Matthew Raridan. I'm your host, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. And the last 2 days have been very interesting, very fun because I have been fortunate enough to watch the first 2 rounds of the Masters. And the first day was crazy with the rain delay. It did mess some things up. And then today, it seemed like a tornado was going on there. It was very windy, but blue skies. It was still a beautiful day there, and we got to see some of the top performers in the whole world at their best. And I can't wait to talk more about that. But first, we want to talk more about this Kentucky Wildcat head coach situation. But I want to introduce my co-host here today. First, we got David Street,
What's up, y'all?
and we've got Ed Smith.
Welcome, y'all.
Guys, I don't know if this is coming to a surprise to you or not, but Kentucky basketball did hire their head coach, and it is not Scott Drew, it is not Jay Wright, it is not Chris Beard or anyone else other than Mark Pope. Is that a shocker to you guys, or?
Yeah, yes, and no. It's a shocker because this is definitely a very underwhelming hire given the kind of program that we're talking about. But then you find out that the guy actually played at Kentucky. Then suddenly, oh, it's not that shocking anymore.
It's a total shock from my end because he wasn't even on my radar as far as coaches that would be in the category to go into coaching a school in a program like Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, they are a very high tier school, especially where they're at located and all that. That is a big thing. And to see that they didn't get someone big really was a shocker. I mean, at least to me, we all thought here that it was going to be Scott Drew from Baylor. And guys, why do you think he ultimately decided not to take it?
Well, I think ultimately you can't just ask why didn't Scott Drew take it. You got to ask why didn't all the other big name profiles take it. And Kentucky fans are not going to be happy to hear this, but it's partially y'all's fault that y'all weren't able to make a splash higher. I mean, you guys wanted to run Cal out of town every time he lost in the tournament slash didn't win the championship. Now, did Cal underachieve? Yes, tremendously. Just one national championship at a program like Kentucky with all the talent that he brought in and year out. Yes, he did definitely underachieve. Okay, I'm not arguing against that. But facts are facts that you guys wanted to run him out of town. You think other coaches want to deal with that crap? You think other coaches want to come into a job knowing that basically their job is on the line right when they step onto the grounds of Lexington? I was listening to a Kentucky Space last night, and they were basically talking about how if Mark Pope doesn't get things going, within his first 2 years, then he's out of there. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, you're not going to give the guy any grace anytime. Again, I understand it's Kentucky, and with Kentucky, the standards are extremely high. But as I said, Kentucky fans, it's partially your fault. You guys ran Cal out of town, and right now, no coach wants to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a different sport, but uh, another familiar school in the SEC lost out on, I mean, they lost their head coach and Nick Saban, and that's Alabama. And everyone thought all these big names to go replace him. But what Ed likes to say, and Ed is right on point there, is no one wants to be the guy before the guy. Right, Ed?
Yeah, nobody wants to be the guy after the guy and then the guy before the guy. That transition tag is just one of the worst things to be as a coach.
Yeah, so I mean that could also be some of the reasons why, Scott Drew didn't take the position or some of the other big high profile names, but it, Mark Pope was, he's an alum. It almost kind of reminds me of almost like a Jim Harbaugh situation. Can you imagine if after Jim Harbaugh was at Stanford, instead of making the leap to the NFL, uh, he went to his alumni, his alma mater in Michigan. Uh, at that time, that might have been like a head scratcher, almost like this, because yes, he did some good things at Stanford, but had he proved himself yet? Where at that same time frame, you saw Urban Meyer end up taking a job at OSU, and we saw what he eventually did there. He won a national championship, but that's a big name. Imagine if Michigan's looking for a head coach, and you're like, all right, well, what about Urban Meyer? These big names, and then here comes Jim Harbaugh from Stanford. You're like, who? Wait, what?
Well, I understand what you mean, Matthew, but in fairness, Stanford was a freaking dumpster fire when Jim Harbaugh took over, and the fact that they had a great year or last couple of years with him is just absolutely miraculous. But I do understand what you're saying, and yes, certainly the job that Jim Harbaugh did with the 49ers definitely helped him a lot in eventually getting the Michigan job.
Yeah, I mean, to have oh no, he did not. He had Andrew Luck, right, for 1 year, and
I
then
think so in Harbaugh's last year, if I remember correctly.
yeah, and then, oh gosh, it's gonna drive me nuts. I can picture him too, who took over. He also had Andrew Luck though
Oh,
as
the guy
well.
who took over Jim Harbaugh, wasn't that David Shaw? And he's still at
Ye
Stanford, I think.
David Shaw, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when David Shaw took over, so they both had Andrew Luck, and Andrew Luck, as we know, was an incredible quarterback, and some may argue he retired early, but I may argue, he did it, to protect his health. So good for him. But back to the whole Mark Pope situation. Yes, he kind of came out of left field there, but he did some good things at BYU. He had a 110-52 total coaching record at this point, and he was a former captain at UK, and he is known there. But it's just he was not the guy anyone was expecting. So I mean, who would you compare this hiring to? I mean, is there a comparison whatsoever?
Well, first, I'd like to make the point that in this last year, he was able to take BYU, which has a very limited recruiting base based upon the parameters of that school, and finish fourth in the Big 12, which was by far not, well, maybe not by far, one of the most competitive leagues in college basketball.
Hmm.
In that year, he beat Iowa State. He beat Kansas at Fog Island Fieldhouse. He beat Texas. He beat Baylor. So there's some growth that you can see with that, and then have him transition that. And Kentucky, I think, felt like that was a good place to start. Somebody that was getting hot in a competitive league, and go ahead and pluck that coach while he's not that big a name, and then be able to transition him over to the SEC and see what he can do with the resources that Kentucky is going to be able to provide.
Well, and
Now,
I think you bring up a really good point about Mark Pope having a limited, recruiting base because Ed, like I've seen and heard Kentucky fans talk about how like this guy can't recruit. Well, look at where he was at before, Utah Valley and BYU. You think elite recruits are lining up to go to either of those schools? Like, can y'all be realistic here for 5 seconds?
no, they can't.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and as far as a comparison goes, I've seen this story before. I saw it with Texas football when Mac Brown left. That's it was a coaching vacancy that was very sought after, but very few people felt like they could step in the shoes of that job and do the job that, as was expected, like at Mac Brown's level in the early 2000s. Well, through the 2000s. So that's where I compare this to. I I then take the next step and say the comparison of getting Tom Herman, who was a alum of Texas, to take over. Once again, these were guys that replaced the guy before the guy. Now it being Sark. So I've seen this movie before, so that would be the closest comparison I would make to it, uh, because it's right here in my backyard.
I don't
Yeah.
want to like go off topic too much, or I don't want to go on a tangent too much. But off the top of my head, do we think, as far as just college sports overall, or college basketball and college football, do we think that Kirby Smart is probably the only or the best example of a guy who took over for the guy, like as someone who took over for the guy and has succeeded right away? Because Mark Richt was a hell of a coach, and then Smart took over, and George became even greater under him.
Mark Rick definitely was a great coach to a point. He wasn't able to get that Georgia program over the hump the way that Kirby Smart has. In reverse of that, you've got Urban Meyer to to Day, which has been kind of a slide back.
Hmm,
So if if Pope is able to stay successful but not get to at least the tournament, the Kentucky fan base is going to feel very much like that.
definitely.
I know he wasn't an alum like Mark Pope is, but David knows this personally. Like when Urban Meyer was hired at
Hmm.
Florida, replace Spurrier, it was like, "W- who's this guy from Utah? What?"
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar.
Well,
Who's this guy from BYU?
well, Urban didn't directly replace Spurrier because
Oh,
after Spurrier we had Ron Zook, I
okay.
think, and then so that was an example of a
Mm,
guy taking over
true.
for the guy who took over for the guy.
True. So, I mean, history really isn't on Mark Pope's side. Um, but it comes the question, was this the right hire? And I may get grilled for this, but I think it is because yes, I know it came out of left field and I know it's not some big name guy, but I'm all for bringing in an alumni, especially someone who has been doing pretty darn good. I mean, what he did with BYU, especially this last year, is great. But I think Kentucky, especially their fans, need a slice of some humble pie because their expectations are always so high. But what has Coach Cal even done to really meet those expectations all the time? I think you need a nice little reset in there. And yes, since history is not really on his side, if he doesn't do well, chances are they're going to find the next guy anyways right after him. So I think it's just one of those that I think it is a smart decision because they're not spending a whole lot of money. I know it's a 5-year contract. That's the only thing I've heard. I haven't heard numbers, but I'm sure it's not as expensive as Coach Cal was. But it's either a nice little transition piece before the next actual guy comes, or you have an alumni who ends up almost like a Cinderella story coming back home, won a national championship with them, and who knows, maybe he'll win one as a coach.
I would have felt like this is the right hire if he had been brought in as a coach in waiting under somebody like Patino. Have Patino come in to be that transition guy before Mark Pope takes over. I could see that as being the right hire, but just straight out of BYU, I'm a little hesitant to call it that. I think it's a reach, very much like later this month, we're going to have the NFL draft, and teams are going to reach for who they think is going to be the guy. And he very well maybe, but if you put him in that that spot too early, it may ruin him, and that's what you don't want to have happen.
Well, I think personally, whether or not this is a good hire, I think time will tell to determine that. I can't outright say that it's a great hire, but I don't think it's a bad hire either. And I know Kentucky fans are looking at his overall win loss record, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like are you kidding me?" But I think we're all in agreement here that when you're judging how good or bad a coach is, it can't just come down to wins and losses, right? Like you can't judge a coach by how many wins he has because who knows, maybe he just faced really bad teams all the time. And you can't judge how many losses he has because what if he dealt with injuries to star players? I mean, we know things like that can definitely affect the win loss column. I mean, the what you should be asking is beyond wins and losses. Okay, what are his halftime adjustments like? What's his in game coaching like? The little things that matter. And listen, I don't watch BYU. I don't really watch Big 12 basketball, so I don't know what Mark Pope is like as an X's and O's coach. So in a way, I can really only judge him just by the results that are on paper. But Pope could be a brilliant X's and O's guy, right? Like he could be a guy that is brilliant at making halftime adjustments. And at a school like Kentucky, where he's going to have far greater resources, I think we could potentially see his X's and O's skills come to life more. Again, that's assuming that he's a good X's and O's guy because I don't know if he is or not.
Well, when it comes to college basketball coaches, I feel like the job is in two parts. One, it's the program building, and two, it's the X's and O's because they're two separate things. You could have a great program builder that is terrible in game, Calipari, or you could have a great X's and O's guy, which not that great at building the program. So that's you've got to be both when you go to Kentucky because that is what that program desires, it needs for it to remain what we all consider to be one of the blue bloods of college basketball. Have they fallen from the bluest of the blue? Maybe a little bit, because they haven't sustained the success that it takes to be in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, going into this March Madness tournament, BYU was 23-10, Kentucky was 23-9, and they both lost in the first round. So I mean, you're seeing a guy in Mark Pope who,
I mean, not
with
not just lost. I mean, they lost to Duquesne, a school
Duke
that
Canes, yeah.
no offense to Duquesne fans, but nobody outside of y'all's town or city has ever heard of you
Well,
guys.
but Kentucky lost to Oakland, and I thought it
True,
was Oakland in the Bay Area. I didn't know
but
there
it's
was
the one
another
in
Oakland.
Michigan.
It was in Michigan. I felt embarrassed that I didn't even know that, but that just shows you that they lost to a nobody team as well. So, yeah, you're looking at almost the same there, and Kentucky had Coach Cal. So, I'm not saying that things necessarily are better, but it's not going to get worse because, well, the same result happened for both schools, but Mark Pope's now going to have more resources at this new school. So I agree, though, with what you're saying, Ed, because he still needs that time to blossom, especially into that Kentucky culture, where now he is going to be thrown straight into the fire with, of course, the expectations being high. So that is going to be tough on him. But if he did have that, someone that he can kind of shadow to then blossom, yes, probably would have been better. But I think Kentucky, they just made a impulse decision. They were like, crap, all these
Re-
people don't want to be here. We need to find someone.
re-
And they couldn't wait for Donovan to finish his NBA
mhm,
season.
yeah. Real quick, since we're talking about the guy who took over for Cal, just want to get y'all's opinions real quick. How do we think Cal is going to do at Arkansas? Because for me, like, I'm in the camp of yes, Calipari did underachieve at Kentucky, but in fairness, I think if you look at his overall coaching career, he's done a lot of good at multiple schools, and this really just feels like a situation where it was just best for all parties to move on. Cal needed a fresh start.
Mhm.
Kentucky needed a fresh start. I think I'm not saying that Arkansas is going to win a bunch of championships, but I think Cal will do fairly well at Arkansas now that he has a fresh new start. What do you think, Ed?
Well, how did Calipari get the Kentucky job? He took second tier programs and led them to championship level competition between, uh, I think it was Providence and then Memphis.
Was he at?
So
No, I think it was. I think he was at UMass before Memphis, if I remember
UMass.
correctly. Yeah.
I get those confused all the time. Uh, so he took two programs that were the second tier and then put him in a position to be successful at the top tier. That's how he got the Kentucky job. Well, Arkansas, as much as they want to say that they are in that top tier discussion, they're still second tier. That let's be real about that part of it. So having Coach Cal go over there, maybe he gets the ability to go back to coaching how he wants to and
Mm.
not coaching alongside every other alum that has their input on how the coaching should take place.
Yeah. For me, the reason why I don't think he's going to do well there is, well, has to do with who their biggest booster is there. That's none other than Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys. And it's like the Spider Man gif right there. They're pointing at each other because Coach Cal and Jerry Jones are one of the same. They have all this talent and they continue to underperform. That's literally, they are the same when it comes to that. I literally read that was one of the reasons why Coach Cal went there was because of Jerry Jones. And I'm like, "Nuh-uh, I'm running for the hills, buddy. Don't go there for that. Don't do that." But they are a lower tier school, so I don't want to sound contradicting because I do think that he can do better at a lower tier school like that, in my opinion. But I did have to throw in the whole Jerry Jones joke because it kind of is a joke. They are pretty much the same person. But recruiting is a big thing because we saw it with Nick Saban when he left. There was a lot of people that entered the transfer portal, but there's also a lot of people who then end up transferring to Alabama with Kalen DeBoer taking over. Well, with Coach Cal leaving, we saw immediately several players enter the transfer portal. But are we going to see the same effect with people wanting to come there now that Mark Pope's there?
I think Kentucky kind of sells itself, so he can at least put together a roster, and that's really all he needs to do in the first year.
Yeah.
Because you definitely get that first year of grace, especially coming in after the season, after part of the recruiting cycle for the following season. So he's got the ability to take a step, put together a roster for 1 year, develop them so everybody can see the job that he can do developing them. Because I think the Kentucky fan base is smart enough and follow basketball well enough to know when their team is developing and not just relying on their natural talent.
Well, and when it comes to recruiting too, like as of right now, BYU, Mark Pope's now former school, BYU only has two guys for its 2024 class. And one of them is from Idaho, and the other one is from Texas. I don't see the guy from Idaho transferring to Kentucky since Idaho and Utah are like right next to each other. But do we think Mark Pope could potentially bring the guy from Texas over? Or how do we think that the guys that Mark Pope recruited at BYU, do we think they're going to follow him to uh, Kentucky?
Well, a few of them still have some eligibility left after their missions.
Missions, yeah.
That's one of the big things about BYU recruiting is you have to recruit and those people that will go on these missions as part of the school. But right now they actually have one or two that are coming back from missions that would be eligible for next year to play under Mark Pope's program. Maybe he can pull them over because if they went to that school for Mark Pope, maybe they want to stick with him. And that's part of what this whole transfer portal mess has been is players wanting to stick with a coach and no matter where he goes, whether it's in conference, out of conference, cross country, next door, it doesn't matter. As long as they get to play for the guy that they want to play for.
Unless you're Jaden Proctor, but no, I'm glad you actually brought that up, Ed, because yeah, Kentucky, like it sells itself similar to BYU kind of selling itself to, the LDS community. But if you were going there because of Mark Pope, if you went there for the guy and you believed in that guy, wouldn't you want to follow him? Because I'll say like Oregon, me being a Duck fan, we get into a similar situation, kind of like Kentucky, where sometimes it just sells itself because of the uniforms. All right, let's just be honest. I'm not saying we're getting the top talent in the country because we know they go to Georgia and Alabama, but we do get some top recruits. But it's usually because of the uniforms. We were getting top recruits when Willie Taggart was there. Okay, like let's be real. They were not going there for the guy. They were going there for the uniform. Where now we're seeing different with now that we have Dan Lanning there, they're wanting to go there because they believe in the guy, they believe in the program. And if people are believing in Mark Pope, it would make sense to follow him, right?
And it would help fill out that roster.
Absolutely, it would. So it's going to be an interesting case and something to keep an eye on, especially. And it's going to take more than 1 year. David knows this. I mean, Billy Napier, Auburn fans know that with Hugh Freeze. You need to give them time because they have to go through their own recruiting cycle. A lot of these guys that they're coaching are still not a part of their own recruiting cycle. And that's when you really get to see how well a coach does. This isn't something overnight, but the expectation is high at Kentucky, so there's going to be a little bit more pressure on him.
100%.
But yeah, guys, I talked about it earlier, and it's a big topic right now going this weekend. I see Ed grinning from ear to ear, and that is the Masters. It's one of the most legendary tournaments in the whole world over in Augusta. And almost just like a lot of people predicted, this is only after 2 rounds. Scotty Scheffler is atop of the leaderboard, but he is tied with Bryson DeChambeau and Max Homa, all three sitting at 6 under. Besides Scotty Scheffler being there at the top, did you see Max Homa and Bryson DeChambeau being there at the end of round two?
Homa, I've seen him play here recently and play very well, so I could say that I've seen it. I didn't know if he was going to be able to tackle Augusta the way that I've seen him tackle the rest of the courses that he's played so far this season. With Bryson, he's on the Live Tour, man. I can't find it on anywhere to watch, and I can't keep up with it because they only play 54 holes. So I'm interested to see what he's going to do having to play 72 holes this weekend, and it's an endurance, and that's something that the live guys just haven't had to mess with.
I don't really see that being too much of a factor. I mean, Bryson DeChambeau was on the PGA Tour. He's obviously comfortable with 72 holes. Golfers themselves, they're always out on the course, doing their thing. Bryson DeChambeau is one of those that can be streaky. And the thing is, watching today, he could have probably had almost. He could have probably been at 9 under. I saw him miss 3 putts within 10 feet, going down the slope that he just was afraid to attack too hard. And that obviously we know his strength is, of course, his drive game. He's known, I could hit a ball 400 yards. He does have the power, but his putting game has been a little iffy. But he's improved, but not on those holes. He did not. So it was really windy, though. This was a tough day going into it. They said, believe it or not, even though it's blue skies today, sun's out, it's going to be harder to play today than it was the day before, where we saw DeChambeau come out to a 7 under lead after 1 round. But today, as you saw, he was 1 over par to finish at 6 under. And so it was tough with that wind.
I may not be, yeah, just real quick. I may not be a golf expert, but is it really that surprising that Deschambeau is tied atop, for first? Because I thought he's always like up there with like top 5, top 10 golfers So
So he has always been one of those golfers in my mind that he can get the ball down there, but he can't get in the cup. If there's an old saying in golf that you drive for show and you putt for dough, and that's exactly where he lives at this point. The one point I will bring up, the one thing on Deschambault that I will bring up is uh, he did have a drive today, and I've never seen this. 487 yards because he caught a bounce and it just kept going. It was nuts how far that ball went. As far as the wind conditions, I I take a saying from literature. If you'll indulge me for a moment, it was the best of winds. It was the worst of winds, and that was the entire round. You saw the wind take carrying balls off the green into the trees, basically flat out stopping drives in the middle of a shot. It was everywhere. And something about Augusta is the wind goes in every direction because once it hits those trees, you don't know which direction it's going to push. So half the day you saw all the golfers just looking up at the trees to see where they can feel comfortable hitting the drives and getting down to the greens. And not to mention, those greens were basically like putting on asphalt. They were so hard, so fast, and the wind was pushing the ball when they after it got let go from the putter. So it was a very difficult day for everybody that was on the course.
And it made things worse, especially for people like Tiger Woods, who his game got suspended in the first round, the first day because of weather. It did get pushed back, so it got dark. Uh, so he had to finish his first round this morning. I mean, he did 23 holes today, and then he's on the 18th hole in the second round. He's just trying to finish so he could go, sleep. He's an old man. He's been through probably 100 surgeries now. And he's on his final putt, and the wind was so bad that the sand was blowing in his eye, and from the bunker, and it's like that it was just getting worse and worse here and there. I mean, we saw guys' balls even move on the putting green without them touching it. The wind was just coming in. But to zero back really quick to a shot I also saw Bryson DeChambeau do earlier, it was just incredible because everyone was hitting their shots down the fairway. It was a safe shot. All of a sudden, he comes up, and this is when the wind was horrible, and he's aiming to go over the trees. And I'm like, that is really gutsy because it's windy. All the golfers were pretty much trying to, they had a draw approach, trying to keep it as low to the ground as they can so the wind wouldn't hit it. What does he want to do? He wants to hit it at the highest point over these pine trees, and he succeeded. Now, I was just amazed at that because it could have gone one of two ways. It could have gone stuck in the trees, the wind hits it, or he somehow got it over, and that's exactly what he did. So I was really impressed by that. But sometimes you got to be gutsy, but sometimes you're a little too arrogant by doing that. So it just worked out for him.
Well, that's um, part of the, I guess, a reputation of the Shambo amongst all the golfers is that he knows he has that drive that he can get over the trees in a difficult situation like that, but he has a difficult time uh,
After
doing the
that,
rest of it.
it reminded me of my days when I was competing in Wii golf. When the Wii was around, I Wii golf. There were several times where I was trying to use the shortcuts like Deschambeau does in real golf. But
Absolutely.
uh, someone outside of the top 5 that's really kinda caught your attention who could really make a run. I mean, there are some guys that are still right there, outside of the top 5 that could still do it. Any of you guys have anyone at the top of your
so yeah, so like this might sound surprising, at least in my mind, because again, someone who's not a golf expert, but I'm looking at a couple of guys, Brooks Koepka and Tiger Woods. I understand that they're both in the 20s. Koepka was tied for second in the Masters last year, but even as they're in the 20s, Ed, it seems to me like in golf, the difference in scores is so negligible that, the difference between first place and 20th place doesn't really seem all that big. Am I in the golf course here?
You're definitely there, and that's where the putter comes in. Uh, because if everybody else around you is having a 2 and 3 putt holes and you can get it in one, that's where your difference comes in. Because so many of the golfers out there can drive as far as you need to drive. They can approach as well as you need to approach. But it's that short game around the green that makes the difference between making a cut and missing a cut, or getting to the top of the leaderboard, or just being an even par and collecting a paycheck for the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the win today really helped a lot of these golfers that are right on the fringe, um, to give them that competitive chance still, because Scotty Scheffler, after yesterday, you were just thinking, "Oh, this is definitely his to lose. He's gonna come out even better in round 2," and that's not the case at all. I mean, he finished even par today to still remain at 6 under, so there's a lot of people that have a chance, and one guy to me that I saw that actually did great today in the windy conditions was Ludwig Oberg. This guy, he looked like he was meant to be in windy conditions. He was doing pretty much everything correct, from laying it up, from his short game actually working in those conditions where no one else's really was. I mean, he was 3 under on the day. So he's sitting outside of the top 5. So I know he's right on the fringe there, but what I saw today in those conditions, hopefully he's not one of those guys that just does well in rough conditions, and then once it gets better, he sucks, because if the weather does end up getting better, then who knows what will happen, because it is Scotty Scheffler we're talking about at the top of the board. Yeah.
Oberg is from what school?
Texas.
Since you're saying that, I'm guessing UT.
Nope,
No, is
Texas
he
Tech.
Texas Tech? I was gonna bring that up too, because Lubbock.
Yep, Lubbock is nothing but wind. so
Yeah.
so having just a tornado of wind whipping through the golf course is actually making him feel more comfortable where everybody else is a little less comfortable. So I'm right there with you, Matthew, and on the Oberg pick, because of that. He is trained for this. Now, do I expect that level of wind over the next 2 days? I doubt it. However, he was able to gain strokes on the leaders. I believe 3 strokes on the leaders today. That just gives him that much more confidence going into the weekend. And he's only, I believe, 4 shots back at this point.
Mhm.
So he's got just those 4 to make up over the next 36 holes. And that's doable. That is doable. And I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to see him get up there in that uh, top three, or even win the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that stuck with me when I listened to that today. They were talking about, well, on average, he's facing about 35-mile-per-hour winds in Lubbock, where he went to school over at Texas Tech. So this is, not even an adjustment for him. This is what he's used to. So you look out for that. And so he really showed that he's used to these type of conditions. He did great today, and it helped him out, because now that we have these pairings for tomorrow, he's going to be closer to those final pairings. He's going to be right there with the guys, and it's going to be a good experience for him to really, uh, show what he can do even these late rounds. But there are some big names who missed the cut, and one of these really is shocking to me, and that's Wyndham Clark. We talked about him on our last show about being a nice sleeper pick, not because he's an Oregon Duck, and he was doing okay up until today, and I mean he missed the cut. Another one was also my pick, and that was Victor Hovland. Don't get me started on that. I mean, he shot an 81 today. An 81. He came in at 2 under. I'm pretty sure he started the day at 2 under and misses the cut. It finishes, I'm pretty sure, at 8 over. Like, what in the world happened? It was not his best day. So I mean, to me, those are two names that stuck out. I mean, any other names do you guys stick out on who missed the cut?
David.
I don't know, man.
Okay,
I'm
fair
waving
enough.
a white flag on that one.
So, so anybody that was following the grouping of Jordan Spieth, it was okay. Watch out for the putter throw because there was something that was about to happen. You know, Spieth is known to talk to himself after he hits a shot, especially a bad shot. And the hot mic on Spieth's round is always one of the best things to listen to because he will talk to himself the entire time, and it is hysterical. So, buddy, Jordan, I love you, man. Hook 'em. But, God, what happened? It was brutal to watch him go through that round today. The other one that I had marked that I was uh, really quite shocked that he didn't do as well was Dustin Johnson. Former winner, and he knows the course. It, I think the wind just got a hold of him, and he just couldn't battle out of it. Then you see the putts when they just don't go in. It's it be that confidence just drops every single putt that you miss in that fashion. Just skating by. It's like you can't buy one, and you're like, well, what do I do now? So he battled the rest of the way through, but he missed the cut as well, and I was disappointed because Dustin Johnson's one of the guys that I was really sad to see go into the Live Tour because I wanted to be able to watch him every week.
Okay, I do take back what I said, and I think part of it was I didn't want to take Matthew's thunder here, but I'm also going to go with Wyndham Clark here because, and I understand, I think that he doesn't really have the history, the pedigree that other golfers do, but it seemed like he was one of those rising stars, one of those up and comers that you felt like this was his time, this was his shot. So yeah, the fact that he didn't make the cut, I thought he was going to make the cut. So
Yeah, that was a shocker, but surprises though for me. One of them is a surprise, but also a not surprise, only because he made history. But Tiger Woods, I want to talk just a little bit more about him. With him making the cut today, he now has the longest streak of making the cut at the Masters.
like
Uh,
of all time, like
yeah,
that's a
he
record.
holds the record now. What he was tied with Fred Couples, and then gosh, I can't think of the
Who was
first.
cut today, by the way?
Yes.
Mm.
So Tiger Woods doing that, but my surprise though is also Tiger Woods because he ended the day at he's 1 over going into round 3. And yes, he made the cut, which he's always done. That's why he set the record. So that's why it shouldn't come as a surprise. But this is a Tiger who is just beaten. He has been through so much. His body, it's amazing that he could still even walk the course. And he did 23 holes today and he still end up finishing 1 over. So that to me is a really big surprise. And then my other one is Justin Thomas, who is also sitting at 1 over with a new caddy, and no one is talking about him. Yes, people are talking about him before the Masters because he parted ways with his caddy. But now that he has a new caddy, he's quietly over at 1 over. And I mean, that's 7 shots off the leader, but we know Justin Thomas and what he could do, and he could shoot up that leaderboard real quick. So I think that's also a big surprise to me, having a new guy on the bag, but still being at 1 over going into round 3 is really good.
Yeah, One guy that I think is a bit surprising to me is Matt Fitzpatrick, just because coming from across the pond, that's how they play. They play in those wind conditions on links courses, and that's how Augusta played today. The fact that he was just one over, but right now he's at even par, I believe, for the tournament. He's It's a surprise that he's not doing better, but I'm also looking at him as one of those guys that could maybe pick up a stroke every 6 holes over the next 2 days. And that would put him right at 6 under, which is where the leaders are.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, British Open, yeah, that's got the win, but they also don't have trees. He's probably wondering what are all these things coming out of the ground, you know? But yeah, Matt Patrick is also another kind of big shocker surprise to me. I expected to see him up there, at least in the top five or even, 10 or so right there at the end of round two. But um, NHL guys and David, I know you've been looking forward to this topic. I know I have been too because I am coming off an overtime victory last night for my Pittsburgh Penguins against the Detroit Red Wings in a must-win game, and I'm all about it and I'm fired up, okay? But the President's Cup trophy, we're nowhere close to that. We're still trying to even make this wild card, and I'm okay with that. I'm gonna let these two teams battle it out for the curse of the President's Cup, and it is coming down to the Rangers and the Stars. And I know I've asked this question. I know you guys have said it 2 times now, but is it still going to be the Stars, or are you going with the Rangers?
Until the season's over, until we see whatever happens, I'm still sticking with Dallas.
I'm At this point, let the Rangers keep it. So that way we don't have to deal with that cursed portion. Right now, the Stars have 2 games left, and it's with two teams that are not in the playoffs right now. So I think this is a great time to just let everybody kind of rest, get ready for the playoff, because you know that you're going to be home ice. So why are you going to risk the injury for the next 2 games against teams that aren't that good, while you know that you've got a much more important series of games starting in a week?
Yeah. Yeah, I say let the Rangers take it as well because, it may help us out, the Penguins, you know? So, I'll take it. I mean, we played the Rangers just a couple years ago in playoffs, and we were up 3 games to 1. Granted, Sidney Crosby got hurt, but we blew that series and lost it. So, I would love to have a nice little redemption, revenge, tour against the Rangers, but the Rangers are a very talented team. I have them going all the way, but if the curse is going to hit someone, please hit them. I'll take it. But David, I want you to take this next one because I know you've got several things to say on this. But at the end of the day, regular season's over. Only one can be the most valuable. Who's that going to be?
So right now, the race for the Hart Trophy, the most valuable player award for the NHL, it's pretty much come down to a two-man race now at this point as we're approaching the end of the season, and that is Nathan McKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche and Nikita Kucherov of the Tampa Bay Lightning. All right, now let me make it very clear that these are two ultra talented players. These are two of the best players in the world, and you know, they're both great. But and I know I'm a Lightning fan here, but I'm going to tell you why it should be Nikita Kucherov and why it should be Nikita Kucherov, right? And it's not just the fact that Kucherov has more overall points than McKinnon does, okay? Look at the circumstances that the Lightning have dealt with. Okay, no Vasilevsky to start off with for the first month and a half or so, and then even when Vasilevsky came back, he really wasn't able to round into form until this last month or so. Well, not only the situation with Vasilevsky, but we're also dealing with off ice distractions with Steven Stamkos's contract situation. And we really, I mean, for the first time, I feel like ever, there is a legit chance that this could be Stammer's final season in Tampa. I don't want it to be, but I feel like he could be gone after this year, right? So you got the goalie situation, you got off ice distractions with Stamkos. Colorado has not dealt with anything like that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they have not dealt with goalie issues, and I'm pretty sure things are still fine with their, with their captain. If Avs fans want to correct me on that, okay, fine. But I do know that your goalie situation is fine, and nothing compared to what Tampa has dealt with, right? And then I saw the stat earlier that to me I think should cement Kucherov's place as the MVP winner. But I saw a stat that I think it was so far this season, Kucherov has accounted for like 50.7% of his team's goals. And that is the most since Jaromir Jagr contributed like 51, 52% of the Penguins' goals back in the late 90s. And this is not accounting for shortened seasons, by the way, right? Literally without Kucherov, we would not make the playoffs at all. We would probably be fighting for a lottery spot right now. We would not make the playoffs without Kucherov. The only thing that Nathan McKinnon has going for him over Kucherov is that he leads the league in even strength points. But guess what? He quite literally only has one more even strength point than Kucherov. I think it's 90 for McKinnon and 89 for Kucherov. Okay, that's the only thing that McKinnon has going for him. And I thought this was the most valuable player, right? Like a team that quite literally depends on the player. Again, Nathan McKinnon is great, and if he does win it, I'm not saying he won't be deserving of it. I'm just saying that when you look at the circumstances, when you look at the situation that Tampa has had to deal with, no Vasi to start, distractions with Steven Stamkos, I just don't see how you can't give it to Kucherov, man.
Yeah, I mean, that was gonna be essentially my point with Kucherov is without him, Tampa Bay would not be, atop of this wild card spot, and making the playoffs. Tampa Bay is there because of him. I know it's still a team sport, but Kucherov has been that defining guy for the Lightning to get them there. And we just talked about it not too long ago with the Art Ross trophy of is McDavid really, he was coming right behind him. He was only a point behind him. Well, now Kucherov is running away with that at 141 points. So I think that just shows that even towards the end of the season, he ended up getting better and he's leading his team right into the playoffs. But another really quick topic on that is uh, Austin Matthews. He's one goal away of tying the record for most goals in a season. Uh, but will he tie that record? Will he surpass that record? And what do you guys feel of that? It's Mario Lemieux, I believe, holds the record at 69 goals in a season.
Wait, didn't Timo Salami or whatever his name is? I thought he had like 76 goals at one point.
I'll have to look that up. Maybe I saw the stat wrong
Okay.
myself, but
Well, I mean,
I'll,
either
yeah.
way, hitting 70 goals is a very, very, very rare achievement and has not been done a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So to be right on the cups of even that is impressive. But we know Austin Matthews definitely knows how to find the back of the net. He does. He's amazing at it. So yeah, so we're right there at the end of the hockey season, and hopefully my Pens could hold on. I say that biasly, but hopefully we could hold on to that. We are at the final wild card spot as of right now, but we still have 3 games left. But the future, I want to talk about the future of a couple teams. Just this is sports, all sports right now, that are in need of a stadium because there's been a lot of talk, especially right now in hockey, since we're talking about hockey, the Arizona Coyotes possibly moving to Salt Lake City. And this is all based upon if their owner wins the bid on this land that he is currently bidding on. If not, the NHL is going to pull and sell them to the same owners of the Utah Jazz and bring them to Salt Lake City. Do you guys think this is going to happen? I mean, this is pretty big news.
All I have to say about this is people in Utah, people in Salt Lake City, get ready for the Yeti.
The Yeti. Get ready for the Yeti. David is hooked on this team. He already has a name for it and everything. And if it happens, David, that's awesome. I hope you
Man,
become
he already has the
president of
jersey.
operations.
He's
Well,
already got
I don't
the
want I don't want to take credit. I mean, the Yeti is, I think, by far the most popular name for the Utah team. But I'll take a little bit of credit. Sure, why not?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey,
badge.
ride the wave.
But as far as the Coyotes are concerned, they play in an arena that is by far the smallest in the NHL.
It's a college arena. I think they play in Arizona State's hockey arena, if I'm correct.
I believe so,
Yeah.
yes. And since the Winnipeg Jets had moved down to Arizona to become the Coyotes, I I don't I can't remember a time when Arizona has been excited for hockey. It's just kind of a, oh, you're a big city, so here's a hockey franchise.
Mhm.
It's not something that anybody's really excited about. Now,
Yeah.
I think in Salt Lake you would see more excitement. You would see more uh, interest with the NHL as a whole going to Salt Lake, and except for the 11,000 that can fit into the Arizona's arena at this point. So that's going to offer bigger bigger market share of revenue because there's going to be more fans, a bigger television base watching them. I think it's going to be a slam dunk if they do wind up going to Salt Lake City.
Yeah, another one may kind of start seeing a little trend here, but Oakland A's, they are plan on moving to Las Vegas, getting that, and it seems like that whole thing's been a roller coaster for a while now. But they have trouble even filling their stadium where they're at now. Who's to say Vegas is going to be any different? I don't know. Maybe it will be. It is a gambling town after all, but they are currently going to be next year traveling up to Sacramento, which is about an hour away from Oakland, to play in a AAA baseball team's stadium. So that's going to be a big downsize, at least for the next couple of years, but it may actually fit the amount of fans that go to their games.
Did you,
Yeah.
by any chance, did you guys see what? I don't know if it was the owner, president of operate. I think it was the owner. What the owner of the A's had said when he talked about moving to Sacramento, and he talked about, I can't wait to see Aaron Judge hit all these home runs. Like, buddy, why are you rooting for an opposing player to hit home runs against your team?
It's more money, baby. I don't who knows? Who knows? But, yeah, it doesn't really make any sense to really be doing that. You could say someone on your team, I mean, for crying out loud, but I
Right?
guess it's all about Aaron Judge, all rise.
Oh my
Uh,
god! I mean,
Kansas.
when you're talking about a team that spends $50 million less than what they get in revenue share from MLB for their roster, I have zero sympathy for you.
Hmm.
Just just go away, dude. You need to sell the team, and you should have done it in the first place rather than putting everybody through this.
Yeah.
Nah, I agree there. Another team that's also dealing with this is the Kansas City Royals over at is it Kauffman Stadium still?
I think I
Yep.
think so.
We talked about this a couple episodes ago about one of the voting measures that did not pass. This was for them and as well as the Chiefs. But the Kansas City Royals, this was more of a bigger one versus the Chiefs. Theirs was going to be more renovations and some other things where the Royals, they need a new stadium, 51 years old. They aren't getting help from the tax reform because of that measure. It did not pass. So what exactly are they gonna do? I feel like they need to do something.
Maybe, I mean, there's that stadium in Omaha for the College World Series. Could they potentially play there for some time?
I mean, I don't know the full story of if they're getting kicked out. I don't know if they're
I
like.
don't I don't think they're getting kicked out. What the vote was to extend the 3/8 of a cent tax,
Mhm.
and that's what was going to fund the build of the new stadium. Kansas City wants to keep the Royals there, but when you're talking about a dungeon of a 51-year-old stadium, this isn't like Fenway Park, where everybody knows it's a ballpark. Kauffman Stadium was built in the era of these multi-use stadiums. And in fact, it was used as a football stadium for a good amount of time for the St. Louis Cardinals uh, when it opened. So here we are, 51 years later. It's outdated. It's run down. They've done fixes on it, but it hasn't been completely renovated or restructured. It's time. They should be getting a new stadium, whether that is in Kansas City or you start looking at some of these other places that are clamoring for Major League Baseball. We already talked about Salt Lake City trying to become a sports town because they already have MLS as well as uh, NBA. Can you imagine them getting NHL and MLB as well? That would be a nice little hub right there.
Or
Uh,
even
Another
Nashville.
town. I'm sorry.
Nashville.
I was just about to
Yeah.
bring them up. Nashville. I mean, that's the Nashville Wire. That's the name that I would come up with, but that's something totally different.
I feel like if Nashville ever, and I do think Nashville is going to get a team eventually. Like I think they are going to get an expansion team or relocation. Either way, they're going to get a team. I feel like if Nashville does get a team, I think more than likely they're probably going to be the Stars, just because I think Nashville had a team. Well, hear me out. I think Nashville had a team back in the day called the Stars, and if you look at a lot of the teams in Major League Baseball, a lot of the names are because of historical connections. Tying back to teams that had those names, if that makes any sense.
The Nashville Crockets. Then I don't know.
I mean, they got the Predators for hockey. I mean,
Well, that was because they found a fossil of a saber-toothed tiger tooth, so that
yeah,
made sense.
Yeah.
I've also advocated for the National Admirals, right? Since you got the Commodores for college, Admirals for professional would make some sense.
yeah,
It
true.
would. I mean, if you're talking Tennessee teams, you got the Memphis Grizzlies, but that's the Grizzlies because they moved from Vancouver.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So they took
and
it with
people in the
them.
NBA are just too lazy to change their team names when they move,
Yeah. Lakers.
or the Jazz.
The Jazz, I know. Yeah, you don't go to Salt Lake for its famous jazz music.
Right?
And funny
Jazz,
enough, the
blues.
Hornets became the Pelicans, but then they're the Hornets again.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, Charlotte is known as the Hornet's Nest of
Yeah, or
Rebellion.
you remember
They tried to give
the
me a
Charlotte
historical thing there.
Bobcats?
Oh, that was probably the worst professional name of all time, man. I mean,
The
that's a
Charlotte
college team
Bobcats,
name right
man. That
there.
was
Yeah.
yeah.
And I know people
That
clown
was
on the Pelicans name, but like at least the Pelican is relevant to the state of Louisiana.
yeah. Yeah, so but yeah, Nashville, Salt Lake City, those of course being expansion cities for these teams. So keep an eye on that. I mean, Kansas City Royals, I mean, I don't know what's going to help them now. Someone buying them out, moving them, or if they start winning, bringing in more money, doing it that way. But they kind of have a little situation on their hand of what they're going to have to do in Arizona. We just talked about that there. It's going to be one of two things. They're going to stay in Arizona if this owner wins the bid, or they're going to Salt Lake City. So that could happen. I think they said summertime is when the bid's supposed to be done. So we'll find out then. But that's about all we have today, folks. I appreciate you guys tuning in and supporting us. Please like and subscribe and share these videos. Drop in the comments who you think is going to actually end up winning these Masters now that you've seen the first two rounds underway. Let us know if Mark Pope was a really shock hire to you and if it was the right hire or they could have done better. I mean, I think we kind of already concluded that, but your opinion could be different than ours. So please put that in the comment section of how you guys feel. We thank you for all that you do. We'll continue to give you guys all that we can. But till next time, guys, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.